With the NBA season only a week away, we have to do our due diligence. We're here today to rank all 30 NBA teams 30 to 1 with some tiers in between ahead of the 2024 season. But if you like the NBA, NFL, or fantasy football, this is going to be the channel for you. We drop 4 videos a week on the latest and greatest sports content. So if you enjoyed any point, support us down below on the road to 1,000 subs. And of course, drop your favorite team down below and let me know. Do I have them too high, too low, or even drop a hot take down on the comments. We love to get you guys involved. But without further ado, this is the Anomaly Podcast. Let's start off at the bottom 5. Starting off here with our first tier, and it's pretty self-explanatory, the bottom 5 teams in basketball. As again, in my opinion, these are the worst 5 teams in 2023-2024. And we're going to start here at number 30 with the Charlotte Hornets. If this is the case for Charlotte, it's going to be another very disappointing season, not only for the franchise, but for their star player as LaMelo Ball, another year where he's not in the playoff picture. But this team recently let go of Kai Jones for his off-the-court antics, of course. But on the plus side, they're also going to get Miles Bridges back, as that was once a 20-point-per-game scorer. He's going to be a much-needed boost to this offense going forward. But overall, as a roster, they still have LaMelo Ball, Gordon Hayward. They should both finally be healthy. They still have Terry Rozier, who could be a nice young trade, or not a young trade piece, but a trade piece regardless. Mark Williams, Nick Smith Jr. are two young pieces that I think can contribute this season in a big way. However, the questions this year, especially if they finish at number 30, are going to revolve around their number 2 overall pick. Brandon Miller, did they make the right decision? Is Brandon Miller a bust? If Scoot Henderson has his moments, that's only going to bring more questions and more hate to this franchise as Brandon Miller, he has all the tools and his skill set does fit better alongside LaMelo Ball. But those questions are still going to happen if this team finishes as the worst team in basketball next season. The Charlotte Hornets, number 30 in the NBA, as we're just at a point in time where even if you have a lot of young, nice pieces, it just might not be enough to compete, even at a play-in level. At number 29, it's going to be the San Antonio Spurs. It's all about Wemby. We know that. I just hope a guy at his size and frame can stay healthy for an entirety of an NBA season, as this team just recently re-signed Devin Vassell to an extension. So this is a roster that has a lot of young, solid pieces. They're going to be fun. They're going to make a lot of games interesting against the top-end teams, but they're just too inexperienced. And even though they have Greg Popovich, they're in the Western Conference, and again, there's just too much talent in the West for this team to be more than a 14th or 15th seed in that conference. At number 28, we're going to have the Washington Wizards, and I am so happy that this team finally pulled the trigger on trading Bradley Beal and even Kristaps Porzingis and hitting that reset button, as when that happens, a rebuild needs to ensue. And of course, the Wizards are now in an okay spot, but they're going to need some time to develop and, I guess, enter this new chapter of Washington Wizards basketball. They re-signed Kyle Kuzma. They traded for Jordan Poole. They drafted Bilal Coulibaly at the number 7 overall pick. So that's a rebuilding piece there, as he's going to take some time to develop. It's definitely a project. It's a better way to put it. But they also still have pieces like Tyus Jones and Denny Abdia. I can't talk today, but stick with me, as I do think this team will win more than people expect. And I do think that Kyle Kuzma and Jordan Poole might both average 20 points per game. Not to mention Denny Abdia might pitch in 10 to 15 a game by himself. I think even with that said, though, they're still at the bottom of the league, as to me, they just need more time to fill the rest of this roster out, and they just don't have that top-end talent like a Bradley Beal that would take them into a play-in contention spot. At number 27, we're going to have the Portland Trailblazers, and I don't know, I kind of regret this, but at the same time, I don't, as they have the talent, but again, they just traded Damian Lillard. But the same that I said for Washington can be said here for Portland. I am so happy that they finally changed the book. They turned the page as they're entering a new chapter of Trailblazers basketball after trading away their best franchise player in Damian Lillard. But they also went on and they traded Yusuf Nurkic. They got Drew Holiday in a trade for Dame. They ended up trading Drew Holiday to the Boston Celtics. And now they have a nice trio of guards of Scoot Henderson, Anthony Simons, and Shaedon Sharpe, as of course they drafted Scoot at the number 3 overall pick. But not to mention they also have a nice veteran point guard now in Malcolm Brogdon, which he's going to play a pivotal part in the growth and development of those 3 young guards. They also have a very interesting dynamic in the front court, as they have wings like Jeremy Grant, Matisse Thybulle. They also have the Time Lord and Robert Williams and DeAndre Ayton, who those are two centers that bring two different styles of play, one defense, one offense, to this team going forward. Chauncey Billups in this team, he has a lot to work on with this young team, but he has a lot to work with this young team going forward. This team will have their moments. They're going to make a lot of games interesting like the Spurs, but the West is just simply too stacked, especially in the playoff picture, for Portland to make a run this year. At number 26, we have the Houston Rockets, as Ime Udoka is now the head coach in Houston, and to me that makes a big difference, as this team, of course, did let go of Kevin Porter Jr., but they've also brought in some solid veteran pieces like Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks, which, say what you want, but both those guys bring toughness and veteranship to this team, which was much needed. As I also love their draft picks in Amen Thompson and Cam Whitmore, who both of those guys should help from day one. I think Jalen Green should continue to improve and even go have an uptake in his scoring ability. And also Al Green Sengun, he should also win the Most Improved Player award this year. So they have a lot of good young pieces, and I think they're just a year away. They have the head coach, they have the start, the pieces. They just need time to develop and grow. And I think this is a year just to do that. Starting off our next tier, these are going to be the teams that missed the play-in tourney. And again, we're going to start off here with the Detroit Pistons at number 25. We have 5 teams in this tier, so keep that in mind. But call me crazy. I was thinking to myself, should I have Detroit as a play-in team in 2024? I thought about it. I debated it, as they have the talent, they have the coach, but I just couldn't pull the trigger on it. As again, they're a super young team with a lot of untapped potential. Guys like Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, even the rookie Asar Thompson, as well as, of course, their pairing of bigs there in James Wiseman and, of course, Jalen Duren. They also have some nice veterans like Joe Harris and Bojan Bogdanovic, which those aren't big names, but those are solid pieces that will fit alongside these young stars. They've also added one of the best coaches in the league in Monty Williams, who's going to run the show. He's going to bring a lot more poise to this team going forward, and it should be a much improved team. At the end of the day, I think this team is just too inexperienced. They're one move or trade away. I think ultimately they're going to make the playoffs, not this year, but next year, as Cade Cunningham just needs a year to, I guess, actually play basketball, unlike last year. At number 24, we're going to have the Toronto Raptors. We're still playing this waiting game with the Toronto Raptors as far as making that big move, but I guess they're content, and I think finally we're past that chapter where they're looking to bring in that next big star. As Pascal Siakam, he's still on this team. He's still going to remain the number one option, as he's always going to be that all-NBA level player, at least for next year. On the flip side, you have your young stars like Scotty Barnes. You want to see him develop and finally get that jumper to that next level, as he failed to do that last year. OG will be OG. They tried to trade him this offseason. They didn't have any takers for that price point, but I think he should take another step offensively. At least we would like to see that. I'm just worried about the point guard position of this team, as Fred VanVleet last year, he struggled, no doubt, as he was more focused on the contract at times than the production on the court. But I will say, when Fred VanVleet was playing at his best, this team was winning games, and they were at their best themselves. And say what you want about Dennis Schroeder, and they picked him up this offseason. Dennis Schroeder is not Fred VanVleet. And even though Fred VanVleet is gone, I don't think that they've replaced him in any way, shape, or form. So overall, I think even with the new coach, this team is going to be underwhelming here in Toronto this year. And I have them at number 24, missing the play-in in the Eastern Conference. At number 23, we have the Utah Jazz. And you can honestly swap numbers 22 and 23. But, honestly, it's all on the same tier. If they're one spot away, I didn't care too much. But Utah shocked the world last year. I mean, after the first month, they were the number 1 seed in the NBA. I don't know if you guys remember that, but that was crazy to say that point. But I do think they're lining up to shock the world yet again this year. Maybe not at the number 1 seed, but still maybe in the playoff mix, as this team traded for John Collins, which completes their starting 5, and it brings a different dynamic to this team, as they now have a starting 5 of Colin Sexton, Jordan Clarkson, Lauri Markkanen, John Collins, and Walker Kessler. And I think that's a very underrated starting 5. But I also love the rookie Keontae George out of Baylor, who they drafted there in the first round. I think he can have an immediate impact off the bench as well. as the Jazz, they play like a college basketball team. There's no ego here, and I think they're going to be a frisky defensive team all season, possibly make the play-in or the playoff push. At number 22 is the Chicago Bulls, and I guess this is a great point, which I failed to mention it there for the Jazz, as I am assuming that all players are at full health in this video. There are 2 exceptions to that rule, and I'll talk about that later with the Pelicans and the Clippers, but I'm assuming all players are at full health because injuries suck, and I don't want to include them. I don't want to, I guess, pray that someone gets injured in 2024. But with injuries to guys like Lonzo Ball, this team is really just stuck in purgatory, as they're not good enough to compete with the top of the league, but they're too good to tank because they have the star talent in Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic, and DeMar DeRozan, of course. It's really just a tough place to be, and again, they're stuck in purgatory going forward, but at least we have clarity, as all signs point to next season, or this season, I guess, would be the last season of the LaVine, DeRozan, and Vucevic duo, or trio, I guess. So I guess that's a plus. But the last thing I'll say is I hope Patrick Williams takes a step up offensively. We'll have to see if that can happen. But the Bulls, just, I guess, middle of the road team like they've always been. I kind of hope that they finish bottom 5. Moving over to 21, and this is going to maybe be the biggest hot take of the video, but stick with me as, again, I'm also assuming full health. The Minnesota Timberwolves. And again, it simply comes down to if everyone's at full health, I just like 10 teams in the Western Conference better than the Minnesota Timberwolves. As again, it might be a hot take, but this is also the lowest I can see them finishing, as Ant is on his way to being a top 10 player in this league and for years to come. And Karl-Anthony Towns is still one of the game's best centers. Not to mention Rudy Gobert on a yearly basis will be in the DPOY conversations. Jaden McDaniels will be in those conversations as well. So they have the star talent. They have the defense. On paper, there's no doubt. This is a top 5 team in the Western Conference. But it is just too stacked that it can really go either way. I can see this team finishing as a top 4 seed in the West. I can also see them finishing at this point, which is where the lowest I can have them, I guess, on this list. But I think they'll be competent, and I hope they prove me wrong, at least for Anthony Edwards' sake, as he's always fun to watch in the playoffs. But I just think that 10 teams are better than them in the Western Conference, and that really is all it comes down to. On to the next tier, which is the make the play-in tier. These are all teams that I can see sneaking into the playoffs, even having some success in the playoffs. But at the bare minimum, I think they make the play-in tournament, and I guess in these rankings, technically, they will lose in the play-in tournament. But this is also a good reminder. At number 20, as you see, we have the Brooklyn Nets. This is also a good reminder that these teams are relative to where I think they'll finish come April. So no, I don't think Brooklyn is better than the Minnesota Timberwolves or the Utah Jazz. However, at the end of the day, when April comes around and the playoffs start, there's only 20 teams that have a chance at the championship. And that is, of course, that means you're a top 20 team in basketball. So the Brooklyn Nets, no, I don't think they're better than some teams that are below them. But they're in contention for the championship, and come April time, if I have them making the play-in, that means they're a top 20 team in basketball. So hopefully that makes some kind of sense. But again, just a reminder, I'm assuming full health for the remainder of this list, and these are kind of where I think these teams finish come April, right? So come playoff time. But for the Brooklyn Nets, their season was a roller coaster last year, to say the least, as they traded away Kevin Durant, Kyrie, and of course the season before they traded away James Harden, and now they're in a new chapter. They have a very solid core now, and they should be decent yet again, as Mikal Bridges, Nick Claxton, Cam Johnson, maybe even Ben Simmons gets back to relevancy, or at least a competent level. But they also added Darius Bazley this offseason, which is a very underrated pickup. This team has length, and they should be one of the best defensive teams in basketball. I'm just worried about where the offense will come on a consistent basis, as Spencer Dinwiddie and Mikal Bridges are good, but I don't know if they can carry an offense on a nightly basis. And I would say Cam Thomas is that guy that can add that extra punch, but they just don't like playing him at the end of the day. At least Jacque Vaughn doesn't. So it's going to be a very interesting year in Brooklyn, but this might ultimately be their ceiling here in 2024. At number 19, we're going to have the Orlando Magic. I'm so much higher on Orlando compared to the overall media, and I really think that this team can make some noise. I ultimately think they can make the playoffs, but overall, Paolo should continue to build on his Rookie of the Year season. Franz will do the same off of last year, and it's really going to be building one of the game's next best duos here in Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero. And for me, they're still a play-in team Just they need a year to get to that next level. At number 18, again, might come as a shocker, but the Oklahoma City Thunder. On the flip side, this is a team that I am not as high on compared to the general media, as it's not that I don't like this team. It's not that I don't see the potential, but I've seen some people have the Thunder as a top 3, top 4 seed in the West. That's just a little too ambitious for me, as Shea did establish himself as a top 15 level player last year. Don't get me wrong. I think I had him as my 14th best player in the league, as he was averaging 30 a game, almost averaging a triple-double, a couple steals, shot great from the field. Really an MVP level season from Shea last season. But not to mention this team has Josh Giddey should take a step up. Lou Dort and Jalen Williams should take a step up in their own right. And those guys have all been amazing so far. They should only continue to improve moving forward. And not to mention, they still have a 7-foot center, a former number 2 overall pick in Chet Holmgren, that is still waiting to make his debut. So he'll debut this year. He'll be in the Rookie of the Year conversations. So since my list is assuming full health, this is a team that can be maybe a top 5, top 6 seed in the Western Conference, but they will be considered a play-in team to me, just like the Timberwolves, as I can see the Thunder finishing as a top seed in the West. But I think this is ultimately the lowest that the Thunder will finish this season, and that is as a 9-10 seed in the Western Conference. But assuming full health, I just think that there's 10 or so teams better than the Thunder at this point, at least in the offseason. But at number 17, a team that I think is better than the Thunder at full strength, of course, is the New Orleans Pelicans, as this is the anomaly for my list, no pun intended. And let me explain, as again, I'm assuming full health. You've heard me say it 100 times so far. But even when assuming full health, there's 2 players in the NBA that you just can't imagine that even assuming full health, they play more than 60 games in a season. That is Zion Williamson and Kawhi Leonard. So for those 2 teams specifically, they will be judged off of a 55, 60 game season from their top star in Zion and Kawhi Leonard. So just keep that in mind. But overall, the Pelicans, Brandon Ingram had a really good end to last season. This team not only extended Herb Jones, but they still have veteran pieces like Jonas Valanciunas, C.J. McCollum to fit around their star in Zion Williamson. They also have Trey Murphy, that when he comes back from injury will be a sniper for them moving forward. This team, when healthy last year, was the number 1 seed for some stretch of time, of course, until Zion went down with some injuries. But considering my role for the Pelicans and the Clippers, I just think that given we only probably get 50 or so games from Zion this year, I think this team will fall into the play-in setting, and that's going to set up a very interesting offseason. Does this team panic? Does the team want to go make that next big move for a star? That would be a very interesting offseason, but no doubt I think they are a play-in team as Zion. Hopefully we get him for a full season, but at the bare minimum, 50 games Zion. Hopefully we can get that. But moving over to the West playoff teams, or just the playoff team tier in general, these are all teams that make the playoffs in my opinion, but they are not title contenders as they are tiered based off of conference. That's another thing, of course, here with the Western Conference teams. Starting off here with Dallas. I think they are the worst team at number 16. So there's 16 teams that make the playoffs, not including the play-in, of course. I would hope you would understand that, as 8 in the East, 8 in the West. The Dallas Mavericks, for me, are number 16. As they have Luka, they have Kyrie. However, when those 2 played together last year, they were 5-11. So this team, no doubt, needed to fill out the rest of the roster. They brought in Seth Curry. They brought in Grant Williams. Both of those guys should have immediate impacts on this team. And I guess they really only lost Christian Wood, which they didn't really like him or they didn't really use him. So it's not a really big loss for the Dallas Mavericks going forward. I think it's a big year for Jason Kidd, as he's out of the door, in my opinion, if this season doesn't work out. But if he can get this team to defend like they did 2 years ago with Jalen Brunson and Luka and that crew, I think he'll save his job. And I think this is a team that can find themselves back in that Western Conference Finals picture. Another team that I can see with a very wide range in the Dallas Mavericks, as I can see they can finish maybe as a top 4 seed in the West, but I can also see them finishing in the play-in tournament or even missing the playoffs yet again 2 years in a row. But I have too much respect for this team and too much respect for this backcourt, more importantly, in Kyrie and Luka, to have them outside of the playoffs. So they're the number 8 seed for me in the West, and the Dallas Mavericks make the playoffs, and it's going to set up a very interesting first-round matchup against the number 1 seed. At number 14 here, we have the Los Angeles Clippers. And you heard my one rule earlier, as I'm only accounting for Kawhi to play about 50 games this season, but the last few years have been the same for the Clippers. Before the season, we rave about their depth and the volume of their two-way ability, especially in their star players of PG and Kawhi Leonard, but then they ultimately missed time and injuries kind of derailed the season. Injuries are no doubt the worst part of sports, and I've kind of touched on that here in this video, but it doesn't help that there's also this curse around the Clippers franchise that all of their star players seemingly get hurt when it matters most, but they still have the star power in Kawhi and PG. Okay, we have to respect that fact. They still have some depth. Can it be the year for them to finally get over the hump? I don't think so, right? But can they make the playoffs? I do see that happening. I have them as the number 7 seed, strictly due to their star power. And I guess they come into this year with a little bit more oomph and a chip on their shoulder. But at number 10, I have the Sacramento Kings, as after making the playoffs for the first time in 16 years last year, it wasn't really a busy offseason for the Beam team, I guess is the way to put it, but rightfully so, as this team is running it back with hopefully another step coming from Keegan Murray going forward. That's only going to make this team more dangerous. Mike Brown had this team playing at an elite level on both sides of the ball last year, and they kind of look like they're going to be a staple team in the playoffs for years to come. But they're just going to drop a couple spots in my rankings this year. They go from the 3 seed in the West last year to the 6 seed in the West this year. Excuse me. My only question is, does this team come into this year with that same fight, that same hunger, and the same energy as last year? Because they don't have that 16-year stretch to break anymore. Golden State Warriors, they're my number 8 team in the NBA. Of course, my number 5 seed in the Western Conference. It was a very interesting season and off-season for the Golden State this past year, as last year during the season, they were 11-30 on the road, yet they still went to the playoffs and they still beat the hottest team in basketball in the first round, as they, of course, beat the Sacramento Kings. They ended up trading Jordan Poole this offseason, though, as I guess it was kind of like a addition by subtraction move, as he didn't want to be there and there was some tension there with Draymond, so addition by subtraction as they traded away Jordan Poole. Okay, whatever. They got CP3 in return, and that's going to bring a dynamic to this offense that we've really never seen here in Golden State. But this team still lacks size, in my opinion, as, in fact, even if we think about it, this team got smaller this offseason. So on top of that, though, they lack size, they're getting older, and now they have to incorporate this ball-dominant point guard in Chris Paul into an offense that is very free-flowing, right? I'm not as confident in this team as I was in the team last year, but they still have Steph Curry, and every year it seems like he just takes another step in some way, right? It seems like he only gets better, even though the stats might not always say that. But this team, I think they're going to be a much better team. They should be better on the road, and Chris Paul should help with that. I'm worried about this team come playoff time, but regardless, they should still finish as a top 5 seed, and Steph Curry is Steph Curry. That is why they're a top 5 seed in the Western Conference. My number 8 team in basketball. To close off of our West playoff teams, we have the Memphis Grizzlies. They're the 7th rated team in the NBA, in my opinion. However, they are the number 4 seed in the Western Conference. Of course, losing in the fashion they did last season with all the media attention they were getting and how much they were talking, they lost in a very disappointing fashion. And then on top of that, they have some trouble with their star player, and now they're going to lose Ja Morant for the first 25 games of this season. But on the plus side, I guess, of all of that, they got rid of their biggest headache in Dillon Brooks, and he's now in Houston. So I guess a fresh start here, I guess, is a way to look at it for the Memphis Grizzlies. They traded for Marcus Smart this offseason to, I guess, relieve the temporary loss of Morant. And now they have what kind of looks like maybe one of the best defensive lineups in the NBA, as they're going to have at all times Marcus Smart, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson, the reigning Defensive Player of the Year, and Steven Adams on the court. All 4 of those guys are good defensive players. They have some good defensive players on the bench there that they can throw in, and it's just a lineup that you don't want to play. That's not a team you want to get up to play in the Memphis Grizzlies. But aside from last year, this team has always had a good record without Ja Morant. I think this team, with the addition of Marcus Smart, will continue to do that. I think they'll have a good record. They'll be fine, and they'll stay afloat until Ja Morant does come back. But when Ja returns, I think Ja is going to have a huge run to end the rest of the season, kind of show the league, hey, I'm back. And I think this team will finish as the top 4 seed in the West, but only time will tell, as the story of this year will all depend on one, how much can this team stay afloat until Ja returns? But then how good would Ja return when he does return, right? So I think those are going to be the two biggest questions, and how quickly Ja can return to form. Regardless, they're my number 7 team in the NBA, and they're going to be my number 4 seed in the Western Conference. I know that can be kind of confusing because I have these numbers and I'm throwing different numbers at you. Don't worry. At the end of the video, I'll show you guys my official East and West predictions prior to the season. But at number 15, my 15th rated team in the NBA in the 2024 campaign is the Atlanta Hawks. As the Hawks, they've been very up and down the last couple of years, and they have a huge range of where I think they can finish. But I think they can figure it out this year, and I think they'll finish at the higher range, I guess is the way to put it, as I think they have at least enough to sneak into the playoffs this year, as they finally washed their hands with the John Collins situation, relieving that headache, as there's been questions about that for years now. And they went out there, they extended DeJounte Murray. That's good. DeJounte doesn't have to worry about a new contract moving forward. And now Trae Young, they gave him and DeJounte Murray another year to mesh and to blend and to see what they really have in this backcourt for an entire offseason and going into their second year together. Overall, I'm excited to see what AJ Griffin can do in an expanded role. They still have DeAndre Hunter, Clint Capella, double O. And it's now a full year under Quinn Snyder, and I think that kind of makes all the difference for me, as they looked better in the later half of that season last year when Quinn Snyder took over. I can really see this team being as high as like a top 4, top 5 seed, but I can also see them missing everything, right? Being outside of the play-in. So I'll settle in the middle. I'll have them as my number 8 seed in the Eastern Conference, my number 15 team overall. At the end of the day, they have Trae Young, and as much as nobody likes to respect him, he is a very, very good point guard here in the NBA, at least on the offensive side of the ball. At number 13, though, we're going to have the Miami Heat. And before we click off the video, let me explain. As after making the NBA Finals on maybe the best playoff run ever from a losing team that we've ever seen, it was a rough off season as they lost guys like Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, Victor Oladipo. But it was okay because we have our eyes on Damian Lillard. This is a guy that was disgruntled in Portland. He wanted out. And he said, the only place I want to go to is Miami to play with Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. That is what I want to do. But Miami never sent a good enough offer. So now Miami's in a situation where they lost valuable role pieces, and they still don't have that I guess, tertiary star to pair with their duo there in Miami. So now, no doubt, I think they took a step back, at least roster-wise. But if we've learned anything from this team after LeBron has left, you can never count this team out, as they're going to stroll through the regular season. They're going to turn up come postseason time. That's just what they do. And in the typical Heat culture fashion, Eric Spoelstra and Jimmy Butler and this team, they're going to find a couple guys off their bench to play key roles for this team down the stretch of the season. And who knows, maybe they can make some noise in the playoffs, but I think that was kind of a one-year wonder. I don't know if Miami is going to be able to beat a team at the top of the Eastern Conference this season. At number 12, I'm going to have the Indiana Pacers. And I said it back in April, I'll say it again. The Pacers will be the team that makes that jump from non-postseason to postseason this season. As I guess I said season about 100 times there, but you guys know what I'm saying. I think Indiana can make that jump this season, as this is a team that was a top 3 seed in the East last year before Tyrese Halliburton went down with his injury. So they went out, and they also had a good offseason. So they were a top 3 seed, and now they get their point guard back. They now also have some solid pieces in the offseason, as they added Bruce Brown. They added Obi Toppin via trade. They drafted Jarris Walker, who should all play immediately this upcoming year. And they still have a very solid core of Tyrese Halliburton, Miles Turner, who's very underrated, Buddy Hield, and Ben Mathurin, who's a guy that could jump up to close to 20 points per game this season in all of that, right? So you have the solid core, the young pieces, the guys you brought in free agency, and at the head of the table, at the head of the snake, you have Rick Carlisle, right? A championship head coach, a guy who's very well respected, and he's, at the end of the day, a really, really good head coach. That's the reason that I have so much confidence in this Pacers team. So I love the potential for this team this year. I can see him being as high as a top 4 seed for them this year, but I held back, and I still have them making the playoffs, just not as a home court advantage team like I would have if you asked me a week ago. At number 11, and of course, my number 5 seed in the Eastern Conference, we have the Philadelphia 76ers. What is going on with James Harden? That's the biggest question that one organization seemingly gets each and every year prior to the season. What to do with James Harden? This year, the lucky winner is the Philadelphia 76ers. As after Joel Embiid finally got his first MVP last year, this team fell to the Celtics in the second round, where if we remember, of course, the Celtics were down 3-2 in that series. The Sixers needed one win to play a Miami Heat team that, again, was on that miracle run. But the Sixers were one series away from the finals, seemingly if they beat the Celtics. But they went out and they added some good pieces. They added Mo Bamba, Pat Bev, Kelly Oubre. So their depth has no doubt improved on the 76ers team. But again, the question revolves around the future of James Harden. And as of this video, I guess I'm gonna have to say that he is a 76er for this season. So this team will run it back, and they're gonna have better depth. So Embiid, he's gonna continue to play, I'm sure, at an MVP level, and maybe he's gonna play better without trying to go after that MVP so much. There's no reason this team doesn't remain a top 4 team in the Eastern Conference, but there's just no telling what kind of shape or what kind of drive James Harden is going to be in coming into this year. And that's just ultimately what they fall one spot to me. So I was going to have them at 4, but I wanted to show some love to another team right ahead of them. So Philadelphia falls to number 5 in the Eastern Conference, 11 overall. At number 9, we're going to have the New York Knicks, my top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference. And this is a team that beat my Cavs in the playoffs last year, so I'm still showing them love. But overall, they looked really good last season, as despite adding Dante DiVincenzo in this offseason to improve their roster, and again, it was a very nice pickup trying to build that Villanova team all over again. But this team didn't add that secondary shot creator next to Jalen Brunson that also ultimately I think that's what costed them in the playoffs against the Miami Heat, as when Jalen Brunson was hurt, he was banged up. They were trying to rely on guys like RJ Barrett and Julius Randle to step up and to be the guy to carry the offense in those playoff series. But both of those guys struggle in big moments, and they're just not that guy to relieve the pressure off of Jalen Brunson, at least not in the big playoff series. So all in all, I think this is going to be one of the best defensive teams in the league this year, maybe the best team. I think they're a top 4 seed for sure, but they're just going to be lacking that shot creator next to Jalen Brunson when it comes to playoff time. At number 6 and my number 3 seed in the Eastern Conference, maybe my fandom is getting in the way here. So let me know in the comments. But as a Cavs fan, there is really real concern that we're going to fall off due to the coaching style of JB Bickerstaff. But we do ultimately have the star talent to pull us over if that is the case, as we still have Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, of course, and Evan Mobley. We went out there and we added Max Strus, Georges Niang, as, of course, we were terrible down the stretch last year with Isaac Okoro shooting the 3 ball. So we added some much-needed help there with, of course, Strus and Niang. Darius Garland and Evan Mobley should continue to take strides in their game, and maybe Evan Mobley takes a step to be the defensive player of the year this year, and Darius Garland can be a perennial all-star, at least starting next year. That is, of course, a possibility. We'll have to wait and see. But we also have Jared Allen, a very disrespected big at this point, that is, of course, on the back end, defending the basket at a very high level. So same roster. We have filled some holes on this Cavaliers team, and we also have our young stars that should continue to improve at a high level, like Darius Garland and Evan Mobley. I think this team, we can finish as a top 3 seed in the East, but there is definitely real concern, as I think if JB Bickerstaff continues to be as bad as he is, we can really finish as a 6th seed, or we can even finish as a play-in team and really have to fight harder than we should for the playoff spots. But that is my Eastern Conference playoff teams. Moving over to the title contenders, of course, onto the top 5. It's self-explanatory. These are the teams that I can see walking away with the Larry O'Brien in 2024. At number 5 here, we're going to have the Los Angeles Lakers. This is a must-watch team for me this year. And not only because they should be good, but these are maybe the last couple of years that we will get out of maybe the best player to ever do it in LeBron James. Of course, that's a debate in itself. But at the end of the day, LeBron is one of the best we've ever seen, and this might be one of the last times we get him at an elite level. So after trading away Westbrook last season, and they would go on and revamp the roster, as we know, they finished the regular season like 17-9 or 17-10. they would go on to win 2 playoff series against the Warriors and the Grizzlies, 2 really good teams, pretty easily, right, before getting swept by the eventual champs. But it's no shocker that when I say that this team needs to win now, they need to win now. And they acted like that this offseason with LeBron and AD aging, and most notably LeBron. This team needed to make some moves now to complement their stars. They did that. They brought in Jackson Hayes, Gabe Vincent, Cam Reddish, Torian Prince, Christian Wood, and the biggest thing of them all is that they re-signed Austin Reeves. Rumors, of course, he was going to San Antonio. So they brought in 6 or 7 guys this offseason, I guess, or at least retained one of those. And they now have a really, really competent core around their stars. And of course, they still have Vanderbilt next to Anthony Davis. And of course, Rui Hachimura as well. This team is so deep. They're so complete. They have the star power. If LeBron and AD can stay healthy, and that's a big if, but if they can stay healthy, the sky is the limit. And as much as I want to see someone get their first ring, a guy like Damian Lillard or a guy like Jason Tatum, I would also love to see LeBron get his 5th ring. As of course, granted, I'm a Cleveland fan. That is what I grew up with. But at number 4, we're going to have the Phoenix Suns. They have Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal. It seems like forever ago that trade happened. But long story short, they're loaded on offense. 3 guys that can really average 30 points per game. Of course, not on the same team, but in respective situations. I did a full breakdown on that trade on my Instagram, so if you want to go check that out, it's at the Anomaly Podcast _. Of course, if you want to follow us over there, that'd be greatly appreciated. But this is a team that finally moved off of DeAndre Ayton, and they got Nurkic in return, which is okay. I guess is a kind of a fair exchange there. They let go of Monty Williams, though, which is a very questionable move, and they brought in Frank Vogel. So I guess that's going to bring some defense. Maybe just they needed a change of heart at the coaching position. Maybe Monty was too hard on the guys. Whatever the case may be. My worry about this team is not the coach. My worry about this team is that they won't attempt enough three-pointers to compete with these other top-end teams, as we saw it there in that Denver series, as they just weren't attempting enough three-pointers to keep up with the Denver Nuggets. And that's really what it comes down to. As they have the talent, it's just the style of play, I guess, isn't always there. But again, just a little worried about this team when it comes to playoff time. But as of right now, no doubt, my number 2 seed in the Western Conference, it's very hard to go against the Phoenix Suns with that much talent. At number 3, it might be maybe the biggest hot take of the video. It's going to be the Boston Celtics, as they are the most complete team in basketball, and it's not close, in my opinion. As they have Drew Holiday, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Kristaps Porzingis, who I think he's going to have a really, really good season. And of course, Al Horford, all reliable. That's their starting lineup alone. And that's like all 5 of those guys are very pivotal pieces on any championship level team. But this is a team that did lose in the Eastern Conference last year to the Miami Heat. And they also lost their heart and soul in the offseason in Marcus Smart. But I think they also upgraded very, very quickly as they brought in a guy, of course, like Drew Holiday. But this team should continue to dominate. They should compete at the highest level with any team, in all honesty, as I think they are the only team that we can say that they have the defensive versatility and the offensive firepower to really blow any team out in the NBA. Especially on the defensive side of the ball, they can guard anybody, especially the Phoenix Suns. So this is a team that is also going to be led by Jason Tatum, a guy that should be in the MVP conversations this year. He might even come away with his first. They have a guy like Jaylen Brown who has a lot to prove, especially after the left-hand allegations this offseason. I think you can really go either way in these top 3, but Boston should be the number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference, if not the number 1 seed. For me, they're the number 2 seed. I think they're going to be a better playoff team than regular season team. At number 2, we're going to have the Denver Nuggets, as they're the reigning champs. and they kind of strolled through the playoffs last year, in all honesty, as a large part of that is also due to the employee of the year that so happens to play basketball for them in Nikola Jokic, as this is a guy who was with his horses all summer in Serbia, and now he comes back. He doesn't look motivated to play, and now he comes back in preseason, and he's shooting pull-up threes as a 7-foot big man. Jokic just plays basketball as a side hobby, and he also just happens to be maybe the best in the world at doing that. So shout out to Nikola Jokic. It's very funny watching his mannerisms, and honestly, he does make it look like just a chore playing the game of basketball. But this team will be back, and it's hard to bet against this team this year. It's hard to imagine they don't return to the finals at the bare minimum. And but again, there is so much parity in the NBA that maybe Phoenix doesn't. Maybe maybe I'm completely wrong on the Sacramento Kings and they come back and they make it to the finals, of course, after building off last year. There's so much parity in the NBA and it's an amazing thing, but as of right now, it's hard to bet against the reigning champs, and they're my number 2 team in basketball. Might be a hot take, but of course, we all know who number 1 is. At this point, you knew number 1 was going to be the Milwaukee Bucks, and I'm going to double down on my take from last year, so maybe that's the reason I have them at number 1. Regardless, I think the Bucks will be the best team in basketball this year, and I think they might be my title favorites. But they did lose Drew Holiday, and they did lose Javon Carter, 2 very solid point guards. Drew Holiday, of course, is a Defensive Player of the Year candidate, but they also added Damian Lillard, and I think that's pretty self-explanatory. You're going to try and trade for a guy like that at any chance that you have, right? But they also added a guy like Malik Beasley, which is very solid to the team. If you want to see my immediate reaction to the trade and to all the details, I have a video up on the channel, so if you want to check that out, please do. That'd be greatly appreciated. But the freak time duo of Dame and Giannis is maybe the best in basketball. Not to mention, you also have Chris Middleton, Bobby Portis, Brook Lopez, and as I mentioned there in Malik Beasley, Pat Connaughton as well. This team is going to be a prime buyout location, so if you had any worries about the depth of this team, that is going to be solved here by the midseason mark. And not to mention, this is a team that I think should return to the finals because they have a chip on their shoulder. Dame wants to get his first ring. Giannis wants to, avenge last season's results. So this team, to me, is the number 1 team in basketball, and I guess we'll talk about it next Tuesday. But they might be my title favorites going into 2024. Before we get out of here, I know we kind of got everywhere there as we split to the Western and the Eastern Conference playoff teams. Here's the overall look of the Eastern Conference. As my top 8 seeds you see on the left side of your screen, we have the Milwaukee Bucks, Boston Celtics, Cleveland Cavaliers, New York Knicks, Philadelphia 76ers, Pacers, Heat, and the Hawks. And in the play-in tournament, these are teams I could see sneaking into the playoffs, but at the bare minimum, they make the play-in. That is the Orlando Magic and the Brooklyn Nets. Teams that I see missing the playoffs are the Bulls, the Raptors, the Pistons, the Wizards, and the Hornets. On the Western side of things, we have kind of the same thing. We have the Denver Nuggets and the Suns at the top of the conference, with, of course, the Los Angeles Lakers at 3. We have the Grizzlies, Warriors, Kings, Clippers, and Dallas Mavericks to make the playoffs in, 2024. In the play-in tournament, same thing as the Magic and Nets. I have the Pelicans and Thunder. And the teams missing the playoffs are the Timberwolves. Again, they have a very wide range. I could see them finishing in the top 4 of the playoff picture, or at the bare minimum, they're going to be here. And this is where I think that's the lowest for the Timberwolves this year. But after that, we have the Jazz, Rockets, Trailblazers, and San Antonio Spurs. I'm going to be using these standings for next Tuesday's video, as I'm going to be doing my early playoff predictions, award predictions, and maybe even a hot take or two going into 2024. But overall, that's going to do it for today's video. I do want to shout out to today's sponsor, though, Life by Laura, as this is a company that reached out to me about 2.5 months ago at this point, and Laura reached out and said, hey, we love your podcast. Do you want a custom tumbler with your custom logo on it? I said, sure. She sent that out to me within, no joke, I think I got the package within like 2 days. So fast service, fast delivery, and that didn't matter to me. I was like, you know what? Okay, that's great, but let me see the quality of the cup. The quality of the cup was out of this world. Great insulation, whether if it's hot products or cold products. I couldn't be more happy with the product, with the tumbler that I got from Laura, as I use it almost each and every day, multiple times a day, not to mention. But that's not all for Laura, as she does more than tumblers, as of course she does amazing work with those. But on her Facebook at Life by Laura, or on her Instagram at Life by Laura 2023, she does custom T-shirts, tumblers, crafts, and I know right now she's doing a lot of Halloween themed projects. So if you want to go ahead and check those out, check out her past projects or discuss future ideas, go ahead and hit her up on Facebook or Instagram. And of course, if you stop, drop her a follow and support your local businesses. I guess not local, but smaller businesses, as Laura's no doubt on the come up. But that is going to do it for today's video, as again, we ran through our power rankings 30-1. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you're still here at this point, drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and of course support us down below on the road to 1,000 subs. But until tomorrow, where we're going to have our Week 7 waivers, stay happy, stay healthy. I'm out.